Yeah, so kind of my transition in 2010, I started off doing owner financing because, there was this huge buyer pool of people that needed owner financing. Um, and then whenever the market really began to recover in 2014, I was like, well, let's go and, be, HGTV style it and put shiplap everywhere and do these big gut down reframes and all that. And what I realized that, at least for me, is number one, I've found that for me, there's more money in financing than in fixing. And so I had a mentor tell me one time, he said, well, Brad, anytime you go to a major city, I want you to look up at the tallest building and tell me, he said, I want you to call me the first time that you see a construction company be at the top. So it's almost always a finance company, an insurance company, or a bank. Sometimes it's telecom, but that's the world that we live in. And so really, I guess maybe 4 years ago, I was always doing some owner financing, but really I transitioned to where the only reason I'm not going to owner finance something is if the way that I bought it necessitates that we have to get out of the deal for cash. Okay. So for me, it's just owner finance city, and the market that's coming is going to be better than the market that we've previously been in. And we've done a lot of deals the past 2 years, but I'm not going to say I'm excited because that's not the right word. There's going to be a lot of hurt coming the next 2 years, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people that can solve those kinds of problems, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. But, for us, it's really just sort of business as usual.
So I love that, right? It's like, when people get into real estate, the bank always wins. We bitch and moan in the office and argue all the time that, when you go to a closing, guy wakes up one morning and says, I want to increase the interest reserves. You're fucked, right? It's over. Like, what are you going to do? You can't argue the day of closing. So when you're sitting in that position, you're right. If you go to, any big city in the country, small city, if you look up, it's probably a bank or a finance company that's got, that building or that logo. And you sitting in that position, I had this conversation with my brother yesterday, for 30 minutes. He was talking about, he's rents a house right now and he wants to call the owner and see if she'll finance him. And I said, yeah, go for it. But, I don't personally think it's a good deal. I think you could probably be better off taking that money that you would put down and doing exactly what you're asking her to do. Be the bank and get some cash flow. Additionally, you set the rules, you dictate how you want to run it. And you don't have to worry about if a construction project goes sideways, if the guy doesn't show up, if the plumber's not there, then the framer's delayed. You don't have any of those problems when you're trying to fix and flip 10 houses and sell them, and then the plumber doesn't show up on one. Now it sets off the electrician, and then everything snowballs out of control, and your timing's out of control. Meanwhile, if you don't own the deal cash and you're paying a bank, you're paying for all those delays as opposed to being in the position where if they want to renovate it, right? So I love the position of that owner finance role, and it's something that, we've thought about, or I've thought about over this little period of time that we've been here. It's like, okay, what can I do to increase that? Like, what does that look like? Because it's a great position if you don't need the cash per se and you're looking for that monthly cash flow. It's an awesome position to sit in, and it's an awesome seat to sit in because you don't have to answer to anybody but yourself.
Well, and here's how it came about. And I think I alluded to in 2008, 2009, I really got to see some things happen that I didn't have to experience, but I got to learn the lesson from. And so two things really come to mind. Number one, the builder developer that I worked for from 2006 until this time, he was very anti-debt. So, he had borrowed maybe $3 million to do a new section in this development. And the development was going exceptionally well up until the point that everything collapsed. But during that entire time, he was taking all of his cash and putting it towards the debt. So he probably owed something around $600K on, maybe because the market had gone up. It was probably worth still probably $2.5 million. Well, whenever the auditors came in from the Fed to these local banks and said, oh, you're way over leveraged in real estate, you're going to have to call loans. I'm sure what happened is the bankers took a spreadsheet and said, well, what's our lowest loan to value? And so they started calling loans. Well, there was no refinancing during this time. Okay. And it broke him. So he ended up losing his development, all this cash that he put into it. And I bet he wouldn't have gotten called had he kept his cash back and not been trying to actively pay this thing off. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so that's the first thing. Number two, there was a big builder developer that had borrowed from the same banks but his loan to value was way out of whack. He was too big to fail. Like if they called his loans and he filed bankruptcy, it would have broken that bank. So he was untouchable, you know? And I had another friend of mine that had maybe 50 or 60 rental properties, all of them cash flowing, all of them doing well. They called his loan too, you know? And so what I saw was that so I have $0 of bank financing in my business, zero. I run private money and it's more expensive, but it's safer during these kinds of times because I don't want to build a business, man, and be in my 50s or my 60s and, you know, that we have some kind of a short-term or medium-term issue. And 08 was a catastrophe. Like, I get it. But, you know, whatever happens and they say, oh, well, you know, I know you've paid your payment. I know you have a fine loan to value, but, you know, we've got to call this. We've got to call this loan. And then you're scrambling. It's like, I don't want to have to worry about that, man. The people that I'm running their cash, they don't want the money back ever, you know? So I don't like banks for that reason. You know, I want you guys to become the bank, not, you know, it's like own the debt, don't owe the debt. And there's a big difference in the two.
Yeah, because it's funny you bring that up because people think that paying your loan down, I mean, yes, it makes sense, whatever, you know, there's two schools of thought, but you're right. When that happened, and it's different than today, and we all know that, but you know, those are the loans that, you know, it's like, oh, this guy's a good borrower. He paid his debt down. You know, it's easier for the bank to take that property back than the 80% levered property because they might lose more money there than on the 60%. And it makes no sense whatsoever. But that's how they look at it. You know, where's the safest place to get my money back? This guy might be the best client we have, but